Well, last time I was going over the story in Bill Powers' little book of Genesis, folk theology, and he creatively tells the story and gives a little humorous twist sometimes. But let's see, we ended with Jacob stealing or tricking Esau out of his birthright. But then we get into the story of Isaac and Rebekah ending up going to King Abimelech's area and having that whole episode take place. But then we're back to the story of the boys, and then it says, beginning in the 27th verse or chapter, as time passed, the boy's father Isaac grew blind and eventually took himself off to bed on the assumption that he was soon going to die. Although, as a matter of fact, many years were to slip by before death took him and the secret of his life with him to the grave. The father, for good or ill, has opted out, and the mother is about to fill the vacuum. Now, you won't read that part in the scripture. This is Powers' way of giving his interpretation by the way he tells the story. But this is kind of fun to listen to the text this way. One day, Isaac called in his older son, Harry, or Esau, and said to him, "Son, I may very well die any day now. Do me a last favor. Take your bow and your arrow and go out into the fields and get the kind of game you know I enjoy. Prepare it the way I like best and bring it to me to eat. And after I've eaten, I will give you the power of my blessing." Now the boy's mother, Rebekah, was listening to the conversation. She's always hanging around listening. So she heard what Isaac said to Harry. As soon as Harry had gone off into the field to do his hunting, she summoned her favorite, Grabby, or Jacob as we know him, and said to him, "Grabby, I just heard your father say to Harry, 'Go and get me some kind of game that I like best. Prepare me the kind of dish I like to eat, and I will give you my blessing before I die. Now then, son, you do what I tell you to do. You go to the flock and get 2 fat kids,'" that's baby goats, "'for me.'" You know, they had all these concubines and extra children running around. Anyway, you go get 2 fat baby goats, and I will make them into the kind of tasty dish that your father likes best. Then you can take it to him, and he'll give you the blessing instead. Well, Grabby now found himself in an extremely difficult position. Everyone knows how an old blind father ought to be treated, and most particularly everyone knows how God's chosen people ought to honor their fathers. However, we didn't have the 10 Commandments yet that said honor your father and mother. Anyway, but at the same time, however, everyone knows the kind of pressure that mothers can exert upon their sons. What was Grabby to say? Well, of course, he couldn't say to his mother, "I've just seen an advanced copy of the 10 Commandments, and they require one to honor both one's parents." What was he to do? Was he to encourage her to live a better life and to adopt a more responsible attitude toward her husband? Well, Grabby did what many of us do when caught in a similar situation. He said to his mother, "Yes, mother." He said to his mother, "Mother, you didn't call him Harry for nothing. Suppose my father were to touch me, he would discover that I am an impostor, and then I would get quite the opposite of a blessing. What would happen to me? Well, in spite of the fact that in the ancient world the curse of a dying patriarch was customarily taken with the utmost seriousness, his mother replied, "Don't worry, son. I'll take the full responsibility for what happens. Let any curse for you fall on me. You do what I tell you to do. Go to the sheepfold and get the kids." You know, that the way he says is not really exactly that way in the text, but she does say that sort of thing. And this is really difficult when someone says they will take full responsibility for something, yet in practical matters and in legal situations, if you do the deed, you do the time. Someone can't do it for you. Now, they may do it with you because they're an accomplice or they're part of the conspiracy, but yet, if you do the deed, you do the time. So Grabby, now relieved of the threat of his father's curse, we thought Esau was the dumb one, but anyway, and with nothing whatsoever to lose and a good deal to gain, he went off to the sheepfold and brought back the 2 kids his mother asked for. She dressed them and prepared them in the manner that the father liked best. And she raided Harry's closet and dressed Grabby in Harry's clothes so that he would smell right. And then she took the skins of the kids and put them on his arms and some on the back of his neck. And then, having prepared the food, she ushered the young man into his father's presence. Now it was up to Grabby to demonstrate how well he could lie and deceive. "Dad." "Yes," replied the old blind man. "Who are you, my son?" Without hesitation, he lied. "I am Harry, your firstborn," he said. "I have done what you told me to do. Sit up and eat some of my game and give me your blessing." But the father had been around God's chosen people long enough to be suspicious. So he said to his son, "How in the world did you ever come to find it so quickly?" Because, see, Esau had just kind of gone. They did this thing real quick and came in quickly. And once again, he lied, "Because the Lord your God brought it into my path." And then the father said to Grabby, "Come up a little closer. I want to touch you. I want to see whether you really are my son Harry or not." So Grabby went up to his father, who touched him and said, "Well, you sound like Grabby, but you feel like Harry." And so he did not detect him. And then the father made an appeal to the boy's conscience. "Are you really my son Harry?" he asked. "Yes, sir," the boy replied. So the father said, "Well then, bring me some of your game to eat, and I will give you my blessing." So Grabby brought the game to him, and the father ate it, and he brought him some wine, and the father drank it. And then the father said to him, "Come up here and kiss me, my son." So Grabby approached his father, who kissed him. That's interesting. In my notes, I was making it's confusing of who kissed whom. It just has all these he, and it doesn't name who's doing which act, and so forth. Anyway, "Come up here and kiss me, my son." So Grabby approached his father, who kissed him. And while he was kissing him, he tried his best to get a good smell of him. And then, having had recourse to all the tests open to a blind man, the old fella gave Grabby his blessing. And when the blessing was complete and Grabby had left the room, from the field comes Harry with the preparations for the father's meal. And he went to work and prepared the kind of dish his father liked and brought it into him. "Sit up, Dad," he said, "and eat some of your son's game and give me your blessing." "Well, who are you?" his father said to him. "I am your son," he said, "your firstborn, Harry." And now we get a glimpse into the hell that selfishness and deception can create. The father, old and blind, sat up in bed, greatly agitated. "Who is it who got me some game and brought it to me? I ate of it before you came in and gave him my blessing. And so he has it," he groaned. Harry, upon hearing his father's words, cried loudly and bitterly, "Can't you give me a blessing too, Father?" But the father replied, "Your brother came under false pretenses, and he stole your blessing. It is because his name is Grabby that he has twice now grabbed things from me. He grabbed my birthright, and now he has grabbed my blessing. Haven't you got a blessing for me?" he begged his father. But Isaac could only say to his son, "I've given him everything. What in the world can I give you? Give me some little blessing. Give me some little blessing." And in the midst of the tears which poured down Harry's face, the father gave him a blessing that was, in fact, only a curse. So Harry went out muttering to himself, "If I ever get my hands on him, I'll kill him." And the mother, who always seemed to be aware of the other people's conversations, learned what Harry had to say. So she sent for her younger son, Grabby, and said to him, "Grabby, I understand that Harry is threatening to kill you. So, son, do what I tell you. Go north to my brother Laban and stay with him for a while, just a few days. Then your brother's anger will subside. You know what he's like. And when he's gotten over it and forgotten what you've done to him, I'll send for you and bring you back from there." So Grabby obliged his mother again and left for his uncle's home. He was to be gone for just a little while, but days passed into months and years, and eventually he did come home again. But by that time, this mother who had schemed for him was dead and buried. And the father, of course, was still in bed, but that's another story, unfortunately omitted from the canon. Yeah, the father lives a long time, keeps going on and on and on and on. That's one of the things that happens to patriarchs. They just keep living a long, long, long time. Okay. Somebody's going to have to keep time. What time is it?
I have 10, but I might...
Okay, it's 10 now? Okay. Yeah, when we get close to time to end, give me a signal, because I don't have I haven't gotten a new watch band for my watch, and I forgot to stick it in my pocket, and I didn't want my cell phone with this. Since I'm in the service, sometimes if something goes off, it'll interfere with the microphone. Anyway, well, Von Rad tells us that the Jacob and Esau story is really a combination of two traditions, where the redactor, the one who pulled all these traditions together and produced Genesis for us, that redactor had combined a Yahwist narrative and an Elohist narrative. And one of the connects Esau with the Edomites, he says, is too far south, and it really isn't thinking about them. But the other, an earlier tradition, connects Esau with the nomadic hunters skilled with the bow, and that the early Hebrew people encountered them in Palestine around Bethel and Shechem and Peniel. But a part of the weaving of the two stories is seen in Isaac wanting to test or determine whether it is Esau. We have two ways of testing. One, he wants to touch him, to feel his hairy skin, but after eating the meal, he wants his son to come close to him and kiss him. "Come near so I can smell," and smell the smells of Esau before giving the blessing. So Von Rad argues, and the other biblical scholars argue, that these dual tests are showing us that they're coming from two different traditions. One has one test, another has the other test, and they've been brought together. Now, and he needs those tests of feel and smell because he's gone blind. He can't see and recognize that way. Now, the beginning of this story in Genesis 27 has Isaac recognizing that he is old, he's going blind, and he's believing death for him is very near. So he decides it's time to exercise the custom of bestowing the blessing. Now, in our day and age, this is not a custom we know and understand. Today, the blessing, if there is one, at one's deathbed or close to death, is sharing expressions of love and sometimes forgiveness, so that the dying one can die in peace. All the goodbyes have been said, all the wounds forgiven, fences are mended, and loved ones are reconciled. And sometimes that means children are reconciled. As they come to the deathbed, they have to face each other and contend with each other if they've been alienated from one another. And then this reconciliation gives the parent a feeling of completeness and satisfaction that all things have been taken care of. There's no unfinished business. And so indeed, they can die in peace, feeling that all is well within the family, all is well with the life I've lived. So there's no unfinished relationship business hanging over them and making them anxious. It's interesting. I haven't. I usually deal with good people, our people who really do have good relationships and do their best. But other medical folks who deal with all kinds of folks who may not be church people and may have a very turbulent family life have said that when there seems to be this conflict and this unresolved problems within the family, that the one who is dying does not die peacefully. There is a great sense of agitation and anxiety with them as they watch them die. And, we hear about vibes, the vibrations in the room, that sense where all is not well. And they aren't given that gift of dying in peace because of these unresolved things. Now, like I said, most of the people, when I'm close by and actually may be there when the person is dying, I do see within our people that it is a peaceful passing, because the family is around. That's why I'm there, because the family has called me, and they, there's all kinds of love and prayer and so forth, helping that transition. But in the Old Testament, the blessing is really something else. Ancient people ascribed to the dying the gift of prophecy, which means seeing into the future. The blind or sighted, either way, it doesn't matter. This was another kind of seeing, a vision, if you will, or seeing into the future. So this part is very subjective. It's a feeling. It's a spiritual kind of thing of giving this blessing. And often it's in general and not specific terms. It's kind of like Spock. Live long and prosper. It's not specifics in that kind of blessing. And it's more subjective, as I say. But the specific part comes when the blessing from one specific person, the senior, is given to a younger person. It's a specific person that receives the blessing. And it's really kind of like the deed to property. It does have more specific boundaries in this transfer that is understood. It is the father's wealth, the father's position in the community. It is a giving those things over to one person to take charge of these things. And it, like I say, it's like a deed in that it gives the boundaries of what it is that's being given. And but anyway, another thing about it is Isaac is old and weak, and he wants nourishment in order to gain strength for this act of blessing, because he needs to sit up. He needs to confer that blessing with a gesture and stay awake and have the words of the blessing. Now, the food, it may also be an aspect of of a feast or a celebration, because this is a big deal, and so we want to have a little feast to celebrate this. Now, this really seemed strange to me because it is such a big deal. So why is it going to be private? There are no witnesses that he asked, let's get some witnesses so somebody else will know that I have conferred the blessing on you. Why is it private? Well, I didn't find in the ones I looked for an explanation for that. So I guess I'm going to have to write an Old Testament commentary and give the world my ideas. But anyway, it seems like it really should be a public event. But if it had been a big public celebration, the deception and the trickery could not have taken place. And so, maybe it was for the sake of the storytelling and for the suspense, to keep the listener's attention, wondering if Jacob can get away with this, or will he get caught, because there's several tests, where he just might get caught with this one, that Isaac might recognize that it is Jacob, and then what's going to happen? Well, anyway, in the testing, the first test of the deception is that quickness of Jacob's entering the tent, pretending to be Esau, returning from the hunt with this already cooked meal. Isaac is aware that this was quite quick, and he's surprised, and he asks, "How come you're back so quick?" And so Jacob lies about his identity. He said, "Oh yeah, I'm Esau." And then he takes the Lord's name in vain to tell a second lie. Now, most people think taking the Lord's name in vain means cussing, saying "God damn something" or "God damn it." But that is one way, but it is more of a sin when one takes God's name in vain as a way of calling upon God's name to swear you're telling the truth when you're lying. I mean, that's a whole thing of, putting a hand on the Bible and swear that you'll tell the truth, the whole truth, so help me God. It is also, it's used, I think, there are people who use religious language very freely in order to appear that they are righteous and God-fearing, honest and truthful persons. See, I can talk the God language. That means I'm putting out that impression that I'm a righteous person. I'm a good person. I follow the 10 Commandments. I'm good. All the while, I'm in the midst of lying to you and deceiving you and trying to cheat you. I don't do a lot of business and run into that a lot, because my business is a different kind of business. But I've seen it and I've heard it. But one of the biggest ones that so often I encounter is someone calling and wanting help, and they want to talk to a pastor, and they've got this religious problem, and they tell us how strong a Christian they are, but then it ends up they're down on their luck and they want money. But they're using the religious talk to get entree and to get someone to listen to them. And then as we find out more about them, we will find many times they've been to every other church around here asking for money, and they've already gotten money. And the stories that they're telling are horrible, and your heart would just bleed for them if it were true. A lot of times it's not completely true. Sometimes it's fabricated, sometimes it's exaggerated. And so, anyway, but the God talk, the religious talk is saying, you can trust me. What I'm telling you is the truth. And I say that's taking God's name in vain, because you're using God's name to deceive. And so that's what Jacob does here. He uses God's name to deceive his father, and saying that, well, your God put the game right there in front of me. It was a God thing. This is God operating in this event right now. The irony of it is, for the storyteller and the listener, it really is a God-ordained event. Jacob is supposed to be the one who gets the blessing and carries on, but not in this way. Not in this way. For Jacob becomes the one that God has chosen to become the next patriarch. And Rebekah kind of sensed that and knew that, and that's why she was taking matters into her own hands, because she felt like Isaac was going to make a big mistake. And so she had to intervene and make sure what she felt was God's will would work itself out. But anyway, Isaac is still suspicious, and he says, "Come near that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you really are my son Esau or not." So Jacob comes near, and Isaac feels the hairiness of the goat skins on his arm and on his neck. Out where our horse is, because one of the boarders there had bought a mare who had just had a foal, and then when she was weaning the foal and separating the foal from its mother to keep the foal company so it wouldn't grieve the separation, she put it in a stall with a goat. So she got a goat. And then she and another gal there had gone to buy feed together, and at the feed store someone had a bottle-fed baby goat, and they just couldn't resist, so they bought that, and they bought that baby goat. Well, that baby goat and that old goat I mean, really is an older goat, not really an old goat, an older goat had really thick fur, much thicker than a hairy human being. And so, unless Jacob was bald and Harry had a real thick mop on his head, I don't think goat skin would have felt the same as, his arm or the back of his neck. But anyway, that's... and all these people telling the story and listening to the story would know that quite well, that it's a different texture of fur. Nevertheless, this is a story with a message, a teaching message, and it's not meant to be heard and taken completely literal, as we hear the weaving of two different parts of the story have been brought together. But anyway, Jacob comes near, and Isaac feels the hairiness of the goat skins. But he says, again, he's still questioning, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are Esau's. And then it says, so he blessed him. Now that's blessing accomplished. So he blessed him. But then it doesn't give any blessing. There's no words expressed that says what the blessing was at that point. But rather, another question pops up. Are you really Esau? So in stating that Isaac had blessed Jacob without giving the blessing, and then asking again, are you really Esau? This is one of the strongest places where there's evidence that two stories have been brought together. Because if it was one continuous story, he's been convinced, he gives the blessing, and then we should move right on to what was the blessing? What were the words of the blessing? It's time to tell us what is the blessing. But then it just stops right there and then goes on with more questioning, more challenging, more stuff going on. So that's a very definite theme that's bringing the two stories together. So anyway, he says, are you really my son? And he simply answers, I am. And Isaac seems satisfied for the moment, and he asks for his food. And then after he eats and drinks wine, and he asks his son to come near again so he can smell him. And Jacob comes near, and then as I've got down here, someone kisses the other. The way the text reads, it seems to be he came near and he kissed him. It seems like the two he's there are referring to Jacob. But Power seems to think he, Jacob, came near, and he, Isaac, kissed him in order to smell and test. So it's kind of confusing. Now, if you read it fast, you'll just blow right by that and not paying attention. But anyway, but Jacob comes near, and someone kisses someone, and then it says he came near, and we assume that it's Jacob because Isaac is reclining and he's weak and he's feeble, so it's Jacob who's doing the moving toward Isaac. But it follows that he would probably be the one to kiss by the language. But then it goes on to say he smelled him. Now the one wanting to smell would be he, Isaac, wanted to smell Esau or Jacob. And we assume that he refers to Isaac smelling Jacob. But he doesn't really smell Jacob, he smells Esau's clothes. And then he blesses him because he's finally gotten convinced. Now, one of the things about this smelling business, modern neurological and psychiatric studies have shown us how powerful smell is. How powerful it is to trigger or stimulate the recall of memories and the recall of the emotional attachment into those memories. I remember one of our retired physicians at the church in Ada when I was leading the Disciple Bible Study, the number 1 course, and we were going through the Bible, and we got into all the different laws for the sacrifices of goats and birds and bulls and so forth, and the burnt offerings and the whole offerings and so forth on the altar. Well, this physician had worked in a slaughterhouse as a young man, and they had killed and butchered and skinned the animals, and he told us one day at class, he was going to have to not come anymore till we got past that section, because these descriptions triggered his memory, and especially his memory of the smell. He said the smell was so strong because they were killing one animal after another and, skinning them and butchering them. And so all of the waste stuff is in a, big pile, and they're in a big, hot, confined space. And the smell was just awful. And he hated it. He didn't do it for very long. But it had been so traumatic for him to be a part of that brutal killing of all these cows and skinning them, and all the blood and guts and all of this was so concentrated that the memory, and then tied, and it brought back the memory of the smell. And he said it was so awful that reading it and talking about it in class made him physically ill. And he had to just stop coming until we got past that part. So, anyway, any of y'all have special memories of smells? Either strong, good, or bad? You've got one?
Well, I was raised around horses in the barnyard. When I would get around horses.
Raised around horses and get around them?
It brings back the memory of that because it was a very enjoyable time.
Okay, good memories when you can smell. Now, is it the horse or the poop?
Well, a little mixture of both.
A little mixture of both. And butchering calves? Branding calves. Oh, yeah, you could smell the burning. Not a pleasant smell. And hearing them cry and bellow and all.
The old bus station in Jerusalem.
The old bus station, what did it smell like?
Like a garage or something.
Oh, the diesel smells? Okay. Well, I had a positive one. I wasn't going to tell you, but I decided to anyway. How much time have we got?
You're okay. You're fine.
I was like 10:25. Okay. I can't remember which one it was, but one of my early girlfriends wore a perfume. I think it was called White Shoulders. It's really a nice smell. And whenever I happen to walk by someone and catch that smell, boy, it takes me right back to junior high. And then I start trying, who was that? But anyway, it was, just starting to date and just, the perfume, getting close enough to smell that perfume. Before that, it was, all the stinky boys over here and all the girls over there. But then everybody gets cleaned up and tries to look nice and smell nice. And that was the introduction to that smelling nice. But I still like that. It's just, but anyway. So smells have a powerful way of triggering, the memories and those deep feelings associated with them. So it seems like, given that fact, this is the convincing test that this has got to be Esau because it smells like Esau. It's got to be him. Okay, I'll give the blessing. So, anyway, but it's kind of curious, and it doesn't give the detail, but what would that smell be if he had been out on a hunt? It would have been a fresh, sweaty smell, not an old, sweaty smell from the closet, and there would have been fresh smoke of the meat and the cooking that he had just been over the fire that should have been clinging to him as well. But anyway, that doesn't happen. Oh, I had another thing about smell and taste. In the hospital, most people complain the food doesn't taste good. Well, there's two big reasons for that. One is your room is nowhere close to the kitchen. When you're home and the food is cooking in the kitchen and the aroma goes through the house, it whets your appetite and gets you ready to eat that meal. When you're in the hospital, there is no aroma getting you ready to eat. Someone comes in, the thing is covered, you open it up and look, and you haven't had time to get your appetite whetted and ready. The other thing is, if you're in the hospital, most likely you're taking medicines. Medicines are chemicals. Your taste buds' reaction to the food is a chemical reaction. So if the receiver has been altered by the medicines that are in you, it doesn't matter who cooked the food or how well they cooked it, it's likely to not taste quite right. So those two factors make being a cook at the hospital a very discouraging and frustrating job. Because most cooks want to please folks. Oh, let me fix this for you and make you happy with this food. Sort of like Jacob and Esau were trying to do for Isaac. Let's make you happy with this wonderful food. But then the blessing starts off with, see, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. Now we know he's been out in the field hunting, but as it goes on, may God give you the dew of heaven, which means most likely rain, moisture, and the fatness of the earth. Well, I don't think it means rolling hills, like rolling layers of fat, but the fatness of the earth means the abundance of the harvest, and plenty of grain and wine. Now, the scholars point out this is an agricultural blessing. At this time, the patriarchs are not into agriculture of growing crops. They're nomadic herders. And so what this tells us is the blessing isn't an historical blessing that would have come at that time, but this is the part of the story that's focused at the time of the writing of Genesis, that the blessing is to the people now who are established in the land and with agriculture. They've got their olive trees that they press to make oil. They've got their vineyards that they make the wine from. They're growing the grain to make their bread. And so this agricultural blessing is what we hear here. And the smell of the field is not the smell of the sweat from chasing down game and hauling it back to cook for a meal, but rather it's the agricultural smell of the plowed earth. You know, when you start digging your garden or you go by a plowed field, there's a definite smell of the earth that's different from a field that's been fallow or out in the woods for a long time. Anyway, So it's anachronistic, the actual blessing from the time of the patriarchs. So the blessing is really about Israel and not about Jacob and Esau. It's jumping to the promises of a people who will fill the land. And it's actually a description of Edom and the Edomites in relation to Israel's history as it gets down to the rest of that curse. Where are we on time?
Well, I have 25 till.
25 till. Okay.
I'm probably fast.
Okay. Well, one more thing about the blessing is that it is effective, and it does, or it makes happen what the words convey, either the blessing or the curse of evil. And even if it's uttered by mistake or in error, it cannot be revoked. It cannot be taken back, and it can't be transferred to someone else. It's kind of like money spent. If you buy treasure with all your money, you've got the treasure, but there's no extra cash to go buy anything else. It's all gone. Or another way, if you embezzle money and you go out and gamble it, even when you feel bad about that, you can't give it back because it's gone. It's just disappeared. So the blessing was supposed to be kind of like that. Once it was sent out there, it couldn't be taken back. And that's a reality of blessings and curses. When we bless people and we do nice things for them, that enriches their lives. That moment is a good experience, and that's in their history. You can't go erase it. The same with a curse or doing something harmful to somebody. Once it's done, even if it's an accident, that person is hurt. And, if it's a bodily thing, they've got the scars, they've got the bruises, and it's in the memory. You can say you're sorry, but you can't take it back. It happened. And so this thing about the blessing and the curse and how definite that is, and how the words carry the weight of the act, and they kind of make something so. There was a book that was written a few years ago or several years ago that tried to pick up on that with getting to the Father's Day stuff, that was dealing with this story and made a whole book about it for family relations, of how important it is to give our children our blessings as they grow. Those words of affirmation, those words of promise, those words that say, I believe in you. I know you are going to do well. You're going to be a good person. You're going to do good things. Whether you're rich or famous or not, doesn't matter. I know you are going to be a blessing to others because of what you're becoming as a young person. And to get that affirmation instead of, well, you're a loser, you're no good, kind of messages. The blessing, lives with the person. And the curse lives with the person. It's in the memory. It almost becomes a part of their chemistry. And so the book is encouraging people to think about that idea of blessing and bestowing blessings, that they do have a powerful impact on young people's future. So, now how much time we...
Looks like you've got about, I don't know what...
About 2 minutes. What is about 10:37? Is that what other clocks say? 10:35? Okay. Well, any questions, any comments that folks have got?
Do you think that the source of the blessing would be able to sort out fraud.
Oh, yeah, you would think.
You would think.
You would think.
And it sort of blows holes in the adage that cheaters never win. It's a very disturbing story to me.
Yeah. Well, actually, he does suffer as we read the rest of the story. He doesn't get away with it and live happily ever after.
Well, that's encouraging.
Yeah. He and he goes away. When his mother says, "Your brother's going to kill you, go off to my brother Laban, and I'll call you back in a few days when he gets over his anger." But he's gone till she dies. So she loses both her sons, and he loses his mom and his dad. And in the psychologist Rosenblatt points out, there is a strong hunger in young men to want the dad's blessing, to want the dad's favor, and yet Jacob doesn't get it. He gets the formal blessing, but he doesn't get the bond of Isaac's love and affection. He's ruined that. He has to go away. He never gets it. And so if we follow that particular narrative of the story, but it is disturbing, and I'll pick up on more of it later from Rabbi Sachs. He goes into analyzing this grief and sorrow that Isaac and Esau experience when they realize the fraud. There's a lot of detail there. And he says, why does the Scripture spend so much time on that? It spends a lot of verbiage on the heartache and the sorrow between Esau and Isaac. Isaac and Esau, their grief and sorrow with this realization, and that Esau, he breaks down and cries. Here's this manly guy, that he's out there hunting and he's going to, live by the sword, but yet he just wilts into a pool of tears when he didn't get the blessing. And don't you have a blessing for me? Just a small blessing for me? It's so sad. It's so tragic at the end. And so anyway, I'll wait a minute. I can't do that. I've got to tell you what's coming next. Bobby has gotten an invitation to Duke Youth Academy, which is an intense week of being with students who are thinking about, have a call to ministry, and Bobby's been thinking about that. And so we're going to Duke next week. I decided to driving so we could talk going and coming. And so I'm not going to be here next week or the following because that's where we're going. Suzanne Wesley Summers, the Hebrew professor at Phillips, will sub for me next Sunday, and not sure exactly what she'll bring, but she knows what we've been doing, so she has lots of things in her bag of tricks to share with you, and she'll be here. And then Ben Pasco has had a course in Genesis at Perkins, and he said he's got some things that he was real interested in and would like to share with you. So he'll be on the 28th. So Susanna will be the 22nd and Ben the 28th. And as far as I know, I won't be gone any other times. I'll be here, and I'll find out what they do, and then I may come back to Sax's dealing with this sadness between Isaac and Esau. So.
But remember, in time there was some healing in that
Oh, yeah. And actually, on one of the stories, doesn't have the alienation. We see that it doesn't even have this big rift. So it doesn't seem to know about it. So we've got, and they do try to get the reconciliation. So Isaac can die in peace when he finally does at 175 years. Let's pray. Well, dear God, we thank you for these stories that tell of some very human people with weaknesses and liabilities, but yet you used them. You found what was good in them, and you blessed it, and you forgave them of their mistakes and continue to guide them and help them go on their way to get to the places where you wanted them to be. So help us feel that the same can be true of us, that even though we make mistakes and are very human, that you can still use us and send us to the places where you need us to be. In Christ's name, amen. Okay, turn off. Oh, thanks. Yeah.
How old is Bobby?
He's 17. Well, I thought I turned that off. It sounds like it's still going.